Podcast. John Sanders, how you doing?
Daniel, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Really excited to dig in today. And just as we were talking before I hit record here, I am coming at this episode as a total student, as someone who knows very little bit about Google Ads and best practices with Google Ads. And so I'm just excited to have you on as an expert to really dig into this and just understand everything we need to know about Google Ads.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
no, I think it's just really cool that somebody who does SEO stuff and Google Ads are talking because we don't always communicate well together, even though our results end up on the same page. But
Yeah.
they're two very different things.
Which is pretty funny to me because you're the first person I've really dove into this stuff with, and so I didn't really know that is kind of the history of ads versus SEO. They kind of butt heads a little bit, but I believe, and I'm sure you believe, we can work together to really improve people's websites and being found online.
Yeah, there's a lot that we can both learn from one another, and the best practices for some of the things that you do for search engine optimization definitely impact ads, and then ads also get a lot of information that can be passed over to the search engine optimization side to help SEO marketers as well.
Right. Well, before we get into the nitty gritty here, I want to hear a little bit more, and I'm sure the audience as well want to know, well, who is John Sanders? What does he do? And how'd you get started doing what you're doing?
So I had in 2015 two things happen. I quit my job as a marketing manager to go work for a marketing agency, specifically to build a Google Ads department for them. Up until that point, they didn't really have many Google Ads accounts. They were doing websites and they were doing some SEO, but they really had no Google Ads department. And then the other thing that also happens is my wife quit her school psychology job and opened up her psychology testing practice. And so I start learning much more about Google Ads, start running her Google Ads for her practice to get things started for her. And then by about 2017, started picking up some freelance clients from people who, she found on Facebook who would say, I need help with my Google Ads. And so she'd say, my husband runs those. And then in May 2018, I made the leap and quit my agency job and started working for myself. And primarily, most of my customers are somewhere in the mental health space, either testing psychologist or therapist, who are looking to increase the number of new patients they're seeing at their practice.
Awesome. Isn't it great when you have a wife who's in private practice, or that you could just kind of use as your guinea pig for this stuff?
Absolutely. Yes. There have definitely been a couple of times where I'm like, honey, I'm going to try something on your campaign. You're not a paying customer, so I feel like I can do that a little bit and to try a couple of things out and see if they work. And if they do, that's something I can roll out to all of my customers as well.
Yeah, I totally relate. We have a very similar story in that my wife is in private practice, and we tried some stuff with her website when we started rolling out SEO stuff. She was my first quote unquote client. Just like, hey, we're going to try this stuff out and see how it works on your website. It's a lot of fun.
I call my wife client zero because she was my first client. Also, she doesn't pay me. So
perfect. Okay, we have a lot to go over today when it comes to talking about paid ads, Google Ads, and all this stuff. And so you have obviously taught on this before, and so I'm going to take a little bit of a back seat because I really want to learn along with my audience here, and I'm going to let you just kind of walk through this lesson and really what you think are the most important things that we need to know about paid advertising when it comes to websites.
Sure. So let's talk about some of the terms that we've been tossing around just for the audience. Is that search engine optimization is these are the organic clicks on Google that Google comes up with their super secret AI formula to determine what results need to show up on their search results page. Above that, however, you're going to see about 3 to 4 entries that are paid ads, and they're going to have a little green ad tag on them. as of when we're recording this. Google's constantly changing that and making that ad tag a little smaller, it seems like. But those are paid advertisements, and that is run through a program called Google Ads, which is what this is all about. And so when somebody clicks on your ad that you display up there, that is when you are going to pay Google for that particular advertisement. So it's important to kind of put those two things in context, even though, like we said, they live on, those two results live on the same search engine results page.
Right.
Those are derived very differently by Google.
Right. So you're basically paying to be number 1, 2, or 3 on those search engine results pages.
Right. And I think one of the primary differences is that with Google Ads, because you are paying for that, you start a Google ad campaign, especially if you're starting a new practice, you can be on the first page very quickly in a matter of a week versus search engine optimization. What you do is much more of the long game. You start a new domain, it could take 6 months, it could take 8 months for you to really get on that first page. Whereas Google Ads is kind of the much faster path to
Right.
do that.
Yep.
And overall, it's not really a question of, do you just do SEO or do you just do ads? It's really kind of getting to the point where you're doing both of those and making sure that those two things are both working well for you.
Right. Yeah. That I actually had a conversation with someone yesterday, and they basically asked that question of, well, how does SEO work in conjunction with paid ads? And to me, I kind of explained it's kind of like layers of your marketing. It's layers of referral sources, where the SEO is the long term.
Mm-hmm.
When you set up that content and you get all the your keywords in the right places and backlinks and stuff like that, there's sort of a ROI of time when it comes to SEO, because well into the future you could be ranking well for your website,
Right.
but in the meantime you might you need clients, so you might want
Right.
to pay to be upfront quicker.
Right. Exactly. But I think, both of those things flow from having a good website. Once those people click on that Google ad, you want to take them to a website that is very good. And that's where Google ads and search engine optimization, that having that good website is so important for both of those.
Absolutely. Yeah, you don't want to send people to a crappy website that doesn't work.
Right. And so one of the things that I will have clients approach me, or potential clients, and they'll say, hey, I want to run Google ads. And I'll look at their website and say, okay, before you run Google ads, you need to step back and you need to write some content. You need to improve some things on your website before we run Google ads, so you can get the best results you can out of that. Otherwise, we're just going to start a Google ads campaign and you're going to get mad at me when it doesn't necessarily work out very well. So I always really like to have that extra step of, and it delays some revenue for me, but overall it's going to get better results for my clients.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Okay, so if someone's looking to get started, what's really like the overview of Google Ads? Like, what are they going to be expecting to as they get into this?
Well, so you can literally just go to ads.google.com to start your Google Ads campaign. And when you get in there, Google has a lot of campaign types. And what we're talking about largely is called search advertising for Google. So you want to be running a search campaign. These are where you put in a keyword and somebody searches that keyword and then your ad comes up. Google has a number of other ad types. If you go in, for instance, Google owns YouTube. So those YouTube ads that you see, those are run through Google Ads. Those banner ads you see on ESPN or CNN or something along those lines, that is also run through Google Ads, and that's called display advertising. But what we're largely talking about is search advertising, and I think that's where you need to spend most of your paid advertising dollars, just because those people are actively searching for what you're doing, as opposed to YouTube or say Facebook or display advertising, where is a little more of a fishing expedition, where you're going, show my ad to a person who fits this profile based off of some demographics and interests they have.
Right.
But with Google search ads, that somebody is interested and they're kind of to use some marketing speak, they are much farther along their buying journey, and so you want to put your ads in front of those people.
That makes sense. I've actually never thought about that or never realized the difference between that when you've got YouTube and display and all that stuff. But yeah, because you can understand those search terms that people are using to find your private practice, that really kind of gives you just a step forward towards that conversion. So that's really good.
And specifically with Google, they don't allow anyone who's governed by anything HIPAA related to do certain things on their ad platforms. So for instance, if you're interested in shoes and you start searching shoes, you're going to start seeing ads for shoes and banner ads. With therapy and doctors, you can't do that in Google. So that's why search advertising, I think, for anyone who's in anything HIPAA related, is much more important than display advertising or YouTube ads, which is more of an exercise in branding.
Yeah, that makes sense, because you'll be creating there's going to be images and stuff. And I think I remember like back in the day when we used to have all those pop-ups and stuff like that. It was all like, lose weight and these doctors. It was pretty scary times.
I'm so glad those days are gone.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so we're focusing on search when it comes to Google Ads. So what's next?
So there is really, the way that Google determines whose ad is going to show is based off of what's called ad rank. So every single time somebody does any search in Google, an auction is run within Google Ads. And Google determines who is eligible based off of the keywords and the physical targeting of their campaign, who is eligible to show up on that search. And the person with the best ad rank, their ad's going to show up first, and the person with the second best ad rank will show up second, and so on and so on. And this is determined by two factors. Your ad rank is a combination of what you're willing to bid for that individual keyword, and then what Google calls its quality score. And so let's kind of tackle both of those things. For individual keywords, you can either manually bid on those. So you could say, if somebody searches anxiety therapist near me, bid $6, for example. And so that's an example of manual bidding. Google also has a number of automated options where it will control the bidding for you. For instance, they have one setting which is called maximize clicks. And so if you set it to that, you don't have to set your bids for your individual keywords. Google just does all that for you and just tries to go out and get as many clicks for you as you can. And so that's kind of the bidding side. And there are a couple of other automated settings, but that's definitely one of the better ones that I recommend to some newer practices. The one Google really likes is where you pay based off of how much you want to pay for each lead, but you really have to have a large number of leads coming into your campaign every month for Google to really know what to do with that.
So some of the questions that I come to mind is we're talking more about, you're paying, you said, like, let's say it's $6. Is that per day? Is that per click? What is the, what's the measurement of that?
Sure. So for each individual keyword, you put in your bid, and you also set a maximum daily budget, which Google kind of treats like a monthly budget as well. So let's say you say, I only want to spend $10 a day, and you're running your ads every day. Google will never let you get charged more than $300 in that month. And so that's kind of how that works. So
Gotcha.
You're not just handing your credit card to Google and Google's all of a sudden going to run up $3,000 or $4,000. You definitely have the ability to control that spending amount.
Okay, that makes sense. That's pretty similar to Facebook ads and how that's set up, where you can set your budgets and kind of decide daily how you want to spend that.
Right. When Facebook designed their ad platform, they really stole a lot of metrics and ideas from Google, because steal from the best, right?
Because they're Google,
right?
They're doing something right, I guess.
They're doing okay.
Okay, so that's bidding. So we're getting started with budgets and stuff like that. What's the
Mhm.
next thing we need to know?
So, and the other component I mentioned was called quality score. And this is where Google is judging your ads. And so this also makes it a not completely pay for play operation. Whereas, if it was just based off of bidding, the person who always bid the highest would always show up first. That's not the case in Google. They've added this quality score component, which is based off of really three factors. One, is your ad relevant to the keyword that somebody put in? So let's go back to our anxiety therapy example. If your ad said, if somebody searches anxiety therapy and your ad says anxiety therapy, Google's going to say, oh, well, that's very relevant for what they're searching. But if your ad that shows up says depression counseling, not as relevant.
Right.
And so Google judges that. They also judge the page that you're going to send them to. And this brings us back to the importance of having a good website. So it's going to judge whether the keyword that that person searched for is on that website and how many times, but also just general things on the website like, does it load quickly? Does it have a bunch of images that slow down the website? Does it have broken links on the website? And so that's called the landing page experience. And then the third one that we don't have a lot of control over is what Google expects, how often Google expects people to click on your ad, and that's called expected click-through rate. But we don't have a lot of control over that one. So it's really important to kind of focus on those first two factors to make sure that your ad is relevant for that search and that you're taking them to a website that's a really high quality place for them to go and learn about what they searched.
That's super interesting to me because I've been focused on the SEO side of things, and
Mm.
it's I don't know, it's kind of encouraging to me. I know a lot of people kind of get down on Google because they've got these algorithms and the stuff, and it's always like so hard to rank and do whatever. But when I'm listening to the different quality scores and all that sort of stuff, Google really at the end of the day is trying to get people to the information they're looking for, as quickly as possible and the best quality as possible. And so when I teach about SEO and just teach about, like, you have to have really good content, because if someone's got better content, that person's going, to win that game. And it seems to be the same way when it comes to ads, where they're really taking a look at the quality of the page and if it's optimized for SEO, is it relevant? Because they want to give people, the best answers to those search terms, even if those people are paying for it.
Right. Absolutely. Because Google knows that if it doesn't serve the best things, people are going to go use a different search engine. And that's how Google's gotten to where they are today, is by serving that relevant content and keeping that in mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. They do it well. All right. Well, what's the next thing we need to know? So we've talked about bidding. I'm just looking at your outline here because there's a lot, there's just a lot of information here.
I'm
So we got,
sorry. I know there's a lot going on here.
it's good. It's good. So we got the quality score. So we want that content to be relevant, the ad to be relevant, and have keywords on the landing page and all that good stuff. And so how do we get into like using keywords? How do we start making sure our ads are appearing for the right keywords, stuff like that?
Sure. So, and I want to define the difference between keywords and search terms, and those two are often used interchangeably,
Yeah.
but that's really not correct in terms of what we do. So, if I target the word anxiety therapy, that is my keyword. A search term is what somebody actually searches. So I could target the keyword anxiety therapy and somebody could type into the search engine therapist in Dallas who help with anxiety. That is an example of an actual search term. And so the number one most important thing in Google Ads is looking at those search terms and making sure that they are relevant for the ads that you are running and the content that you have on your website. If your ads are getting a bunch of search terms that are not relevant for what you do, you're going to end up spending a lot of money really quickly on things that aren't relevant to you, and you're not going to get new patients. And so that's the importance of, you know, and we could go way off into the weeds about like different match types and things like that, but it's just being very careful with your keywords and making sure that you're getting the right searches. And you can also take those handy dandy search terms and give them to your SEO marketer, and then they can go out and try to optimize for those terms. It's one of the ways that we can really work together.
So when you start a new campaign, and so let's say you're starting with somebody who does want to rank for anxiety therapy, you're starting a new campaign, this is a new client. Do you do keyword research, and how does that setup work within the ad system? Like, are you putting in just anxiety therapy and then just kind of guessing at the different search terms that would kind of go along with that? How is that? Like, I don't even know the platform. I've never even been in it, or I haven't been
Sure.
in there in like 10 years since it started. So I don't know what everything looks like. So I'm just curious about a little bit of that setup with keywords versus search terms.
Right. So one of the advantages I have kind of specializing in this is that, you know, I've had a number of campaigns, so I know a lot of the terms that are going to get searched. So in a lot of cases, I don't have to do like that keyword research if I'm dealing with somebody who is just doing therapy. Now, if somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, John, I want to sell websites," or "Hey, John, I want to sell air conditioners," then I got to go do some keyword research on those to see what those search volumes are. Google has a tool for that called Keyword Planner. Um, but for the most part, I've got a lot of those keywords already written out, and so I can put those into a new campaign pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it's, you know, not only having anxiety therapy, but it's having anxiety treatment, which is a popular one, or anxiety counseling, or something along those lines, and then sprinkling in some terms like, you know, counseling near me or therapy near me. Um, Also, city names are important. So you might have Dallas counseling, for example, if you were in Dallas, and or just whatever
Right.
your city name is. You'll want to have kind of these different what are called ad groups within Google. And so um, when people search those things, you're going to show them an appropriate ad. So you're going to have all of your anxiety terms grouped together, and then when they search those keywords, you're then going to show them about anxiety. Or if they search depression, you're going to show them an ad about depression, and then you're also going to take them to that specific page on your website that is specifically about those topics.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so what's the next thing we need to know about Google Ads?
So I would say there are really four ways to measure the success of your Google Ads that we can talk about. And the first one is what's called click-through rate, or CTR. You'll see that all over the Google platform, and it's usually abbreviated. So within Google, you're going to see how many people saw your ads. That's called impressions, and how many clicks you got. And dividing clicks by impressions gets us this click-through rate. So how often people are actually clicking on your ads. And if it's 1% or lower, you probably have some keyword problems. Your ad is probably being served on some search terms that are not relevant for you. There's something wrong with your ad that's not speaking to your audience. If it's, you know, 1 to 2%, maybe you've got part of it right. Like maybe you have a good ad, but your ads are being served on the wrong search terms. 2, 3, 4% is more like the internet average of the click-through rate that you can expect to see from Google Ads. If you're 5, 6%, 7%, 8%, your ad is probably good. It is being served to, you know, really highly relevant search terms. You probably have a very good ad. And anything over 8% is really bonkers very good. You know, and you won't see those too often. You might see those in cases where you don't have a lot of competitors in the area, for example,
Mm-hmm.
um, or you're doing something very highly specialized that no one else is really trying to advertise for, and you're the only game in town. You're going to see a higher click-through rates from that. And so that's if you're going in and you're looking at your campaign, that's probably the first way to judge, is it successful?
And this could be a total, can of worms to open here. So if the click-through rate is very low, um, at what point would you say that someone should go in and start figuring out, what are the factors that could be affecting that?
Sure. So
The reason why I asked is because I've seen a lot of people say like, "Oh, I did ads, but it didn't work."
right,
And sometimes, when you dig into that, like, well, they ran ads for like a month, and that was it. They spent the money, it didn't work, so they kind of
right,
write off ads. But
right,
what I've learned from doing my own Facebook ads is that there's a lot of testing, there's a lot of
yes,
numbers, there's a lot of tweaking along the way to change one little thing at a time could affect the whole thing.
right.
So at what point do you kind of get in there and you start digging into that stuff if your click-through rate is low?
So overall, to kind of address the idea about turning off ads, I really tell people that you really need to give your campaign about 90 days to really figure out what's going on, to get, if you're a stats nerd, statistically significant data. Um, Really, after, if you run ads for your first week, 2 weeks, this is kind of your adjustment period. This is where you're going to be increasing some of your bids. Maybe your bids are too low and your ad is just not being shown high enough on the results page. But if your ad, you find you're being shown above the organic results in most cases, um, and you're still not getting clicks, you know, maybe you're a month in. That's when you have to start thinking about, is there something wrong with this ad? Is there something wrong with the search terms that it's being shown to really kind of dig into to saying, okay, what is the problem here? And, does this do I need to change the ad text? Do I need to fix my keywords? And to try to figure that issue out.
Yeah, and is there one place you kind of always find yourself starting with when you have like a low performing ad? Is it like looking at the keywords, looking at the text in the ad, the ad copy?
I almost always start with the search terms,
Okay.
and I would tell you that the most important thing in Google Ads is what search terms you're showing up on. If you're showing up on the right search terms, even a mediocre ad can still be relatively successful. Um, we don't want to write mediocre ads, but I would rather have a mediocre ad and good keywords
Yeah.
versus a spectacular ad with bad keywords.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Makes sense. All right. What are some other ways that people can measure their success?
So the second way is you can import data from a program. You're probably on very often Google Analytics,
Yeah.
where you can see how long people are spending on your website when they come to your website from your ads, how many pages they're looking at, and how often do they just look at one page and leave, that being called the bounce rate. So you can look at those numbers, and I think probably the most important one there is how long people are spending on your site. If they're spending about a minute on your site or more, I'm at least somewhat happy with that. The more time they spend on that site, the more likely they are to do the things that you want them to do, which is ultimately call you, fill out a form on your website, or if you have some sort of online scheduling, go into your online scheduler. And so to see also how many pages they're looking at. Um, but if you go in and you find after a month people are only spending 15 seconds on your website, once again, you probably have either a search term problem or there's something going on with your website that needs to be
Right.
addressed.
Right. Okay, makes sense. All right. What else? How else can we measure?
So the third thing that we can do is using Google Analytics, using some code from Google, and there are a number of different ways of doing this. We can measure if people are taking those actions that we had talked about on your website, if they're calling you, if they're filling out a form, and using some of those programs like Google Analytics to record that information and then that can be then imported back into Google Ads. And so you can see, Google Ads calls it conversions. So you can see effectively how many leads you are getting off of your Google Ads, and also kind of breaking that down as a percentage. If you get 100 clicks, are you getting 10 leads, which would be fairly good at a 10% rate? Are you getting 5 leads, which would still be okay? Or are you getting absolutely no leads? Overall, Google says that probably the average is about 2 to 3% in terms of a lead rate. We want to do better than that. But ultimately, seeing how many leads you're getting is going to really kind of help you with kind of what rolls into the fourth part of, are you getting a return on investment for these ads? So if you spend $300 in a month, and let's say you get 100 clicks and you get 7 leads, and 3 of those turn into patients, the question is, how long are those people going to stay with you, at what rate they're paying, and what is kind of the average value of that client? So if we say in this example, each one, they're going to stay a couple of months, and your average revenue out of them, you might see $2,000 in average revenue per patient.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can get 3 patients, I know this is a lot of math. So if you can get 3 patients.
This is good. I love this stuff. I'm getting excited.
So if you get 3 patients and you can say, okay, over this next year, I'm going to get $6,000 in revenue out of this. That would be worth the $300 that you spend. And so that is the ultimate thing that you should be looking at, is, are you getting a good return on your marketing dollars that you're putting in that campaign?
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up, because I think that's almost, that could be almost step one of, like, even before you start doing ads, is understanding what is your average client value. And this was a really a big aha moment for me when I was learning a little bit more about Facebook ads and running campaigns for our WordPress online course that we have. Once I understood what that average value was, and then you're okay with spending the money, because you understand, okay, if this many people see it, this many people turn into leads, this many people convert, it's okay spending the money, because it's actually, you're putting in, $1 in to make $3, that sort of thing. And so if there's people out there listening right now, and you're kind of on the fence about starting advertising, I would just encourage you to look at some of those numbers, and just take a look at maybe your last 6 months, and how long people are staying with you, and really what the value of each of those clients actually is. Just find that average. That's super helpful.
Yeah, and when I have a potential client who comes to me, I usually ask this question of, what is, how long do people stay with you? Are you getting paid based on insurance, or is it private pay? And can we get to that average value? Because in a lot of cases, you have some of that data. Maybe you haven't thought about it in those terms, but to really kind of figure out, what is your average patient worth, and what are you ultimately willing to pay for that? And then, if you do all those things, like you said, you're that when you spend $300 or $500 on Google in a month, it doesn't seem terrible, because you know that you're going to get several $1,000s in revenue based off of that.
Right. Yep. I had one question when we were talking about conversions that I'd love to hear your opinion on, and that is, when you're measuring conversions, on a website, it's kind of simple as far as, okay, you got somebody to show up on the landing page, and maybe they clicked a button and went to your contact form, or filled out your contact form.
Right.
But I suspect with, I see with a lot of my own clients when building their websites, a lot of times they have a phone number there. So how do you measure conversions when you're running ads between, you've got emails, contact forms, maybe somebody just picks up the phone and calls you. Do you factor all that in when it comes to ads?
Yeah, really, when I look at a website, I look at what all of those success measures are. Now, most of my clients, it's just going to be filling out the contact form, maybe they have their email address on the website, and measuring those phone numbers. The more complicated clients are the ones that are going over to some sort of automated schedule where you can schedule online.
Yeah.
But for phone number, there are two ways to do it that I use. One, Google Ads actually has some code that you can add into your website where it will record when somebody calls you from Google Ads. Um, and you say, if the phone call is over 60 seconds, count that as a lead or a conversion.
Oh, wow.
Um,
I didn't know that.
the other way you can do it, and this is what I really do for my larger clients who were kind of doing that ongoing monthly management, is to use a piece of call recording software called Call Tracking Metrics that I use, which is a HIPAA compliant piece of software. And so what that does is when somebody comes to your site from Google Ads, it dynamically changes the phone number just a little bit. If you've ever seen a phone number flicker on the website, a website you've been to, this is why.
Aha.
Um, and then it will record that call. And so we can go into the call platform and say, this person called, they talked to you for 8 minutes, they scheduled. So you know that person came to you from Google Ads. Whereas if you just use what's built into Google Ads, you don't know exactly who the person is because that call's not recording. You just know that you got a call that was over a minute, for example.
Right.
And then as far as forms, in a lot of cases, you can attach a thank you page after somebody, fills out your form, and then you end up counting your thank you pages, and that's how many people actually ended up
Right.
coming over to you from forms. And then, you probably have some sort of, form plugin on the back end that records, who that was.
Gotcha. Okay. That's pretty sneaky and kind of cool and geeky, and I love it. That has
Yes.
always stumped me when it comes to therapist websites, because a lot of people do have their phone number right on there, and it's a little trickier to track those conversions. But it's nice to know that there's software out there, and there's just different ways to do it. Cool.
And with call tracking metrics, I really just use it for Google Ads as a Google Ads specialist, but you can also do that for organic clicks or Facebook ads or
Right.
different other sources, as well as your website sees people coming in, and it will show them a different phone number based off of where they came from.
Right. And what was that software called again?
Call tracking metrics.
Okay, cool. We'll
There's another one out there called CallRail. I just used call tracking metrics for a long time, but CallRail is a good product too.
Okay, cool. We'll put those links in the show notes for this episode. Okay, cool. Well, you have taken us through a lot, and so we're kind of bringing the train into the station here a little bit. And I know
Sure.
that we can kind of talk about this forever. So,
Right.
I want you to kind of leave us with, what are some final thoughts, some final things that people really know when it comes to getting started with Google Ads.
So, like I said, you can just go to ads.google.com to get started. And when you go there, they've got a couple of different campaign types. Like, they have what used to be called AdWords Express. They now call it Smart Ads. I would avoid those. You lose some of the options, some of the things that we have talked about today. And to really kind of go with a full Google Ads campaign. And I know it can be quite a bit to go through and learn that new skill set. And maybe you should be, seeing clients as opposed to trying to figure out Google Ads or search
Yeah.
engine optimization. It's kind of like, I don't enjoy accounting, so I have a bookkeeper who does that stuff for me. Much the same way, that's kind of where marketers like you and I come in, as opposed to, you trying to figure out Google Ads, get Daniel or get John to help run that marketing
Right.
campaign for you.
Yeah. Yeah. There's your time's better spent on the things that you love, and that the things that only you can do. And I'm a big fan of, if you can afford to have somebody else do it, especially if it's not something that you love, go for it, because that's actually going to create more margin in your life and help you focus on the things that are really going to move the needle in your business.
No, absolutely. I think the smartest thing that my wife ever did in her practice was hire a virtual assistant. So she didn't have to file insurance claims anymore, didn't have to answer her own phone. And kind of tying that back to Google Ads, when I'm running that call tracking software and I see a bunch of calls going into the therapist, but they all just go to voicemail because the therapist is trying to answer their own phone,
Yeah.
you're potentially losing clients. And so that's why my pro tip outside of Google Ads today would be, if you are a therapist, don't try to answer your own phone. Get a virtual assistant to try to do that for you, to convert those people into patients when they call, as opposed to you trying to call them back 5 hours later.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that could be a whole other podcast episode right there. Outsourcing,
Yes.
virtual assistants, all that fun stuff.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, awesome. Well, any last words of wisdom?
Really, it all goes back to those search terms that you're getting in your campaign. If you're running a Google Ads campaign, go to that search term section and see what's there. And if you're happy with those results, that's great. But if you're seeing a bunch of things for, massage therapist, or EMDR, and if you're not an EMDR therapist, making sure that everything in there is something that you can help somebody with.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much for your wisdom and breaking down a lot of this stuff. I know I learned a ton of stuff, and it actually brings up a lot more questions that I'm sure we'll be chatting about off air here, for
Okay, we
sure.
could do another episode. We could do a Q&A one day.
Sounds good. Yeah, I would love to have you back on. Maybe we'll even accept some questions from the audience about Google Ads, and you can just bring your knowledge for sure. Well, where can people find you online if they want to hire you for Google Ads or just learn more about what you do and getting started?
Sure. If you're interested, just go out to RevKey, that's RevKey.com, to see more about my services, and go ahead and fill out that form on the website, and we'll talk about all these things, like how much your average client is worth, and get you started on a Google Ads campaign.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, John. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Daniel. Appreciate it.
Cool.